Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling to the narrow alleys and paper-walled homes of 17th century Edo, the bustling city we now call Tokyo. But this isn't the sleek, neon-drenched Tokyo you know from anime and travel vlogs. Nope. This Tokyo smells like fish wood smoke and a lot of wet straw. You wake on a straw-stuffed futon before the sun rises because, of course, your job doesn't care if it's still basically night. Outside, the cold seeps through every crack in your sliding wooden doors. Inside, your breath makes tiny clouds, and your toes, yeah, they're already mad at you. Your house is tiny. Most Edo dwellings are. You share yours with several relatives, a few fleas, and a floor plan that hates privacy. The walls are made of wooden beams and shoji paper stretched across a frame, so thin a stern look could probably punch a hole in it. There's no insulation. The roof groans when it rains. And the tatami mat floor. It's beautiful, sure, but about as warm as the inside of a rice barrel at dawn. You keep your layers nearby, a thick cotton Hanton jacket, maybe a second pair of split-toe socks, if you're fancy, and shuffle into them like someone preparing for a stylish but deeply uncomfortable camping trip. The first thing you hear is your neighbor's rooster, who apparently hates you personally. The second thing you hear is your cousin snoring like a haunted bellows. Your aunt starts stirring water in the iron kettle over the irori hearth. The charcoal is low, the heat is lower. It's a marvel anyone survives a full winter in Edo without turning into pickled radish. Still, you sit up, you breathe, you begin your day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your breath fogs as you lean toward the hearth. The coals hiss faintly beneath the ashes. You prod them with a metal rod, not because it helps, but because it makes you feel productive. Light seeps around the paper doors, less like dawn, more like someone spilled gray tea across the sky. Edo mornings are rarely sunny. Between the haze smoke and ocean air, most days look like the prelude to a ghost story. You press your feet into worn straw slippers and head toward the front of the house. Every step across the tatami sounds like a creak from an old ship. You slide open the outer door just an inch. Cold air punches your face immediately. Not gently, not politely, just thwack, like nature itself is reminding you that you live in a house made of paper and wishes. You shut the door again. It can wait. You light the oil lamp. It sputters like it wants to go back to bed, too. The flame glows faintly against the walls, casting warped shadows of your bundled form. This is your life. Small, cold routine, but alive. The city beyond is just beginning to stir. Somewhere someone is already shouting about tofu. Somewhere else a samurai is yawning into his sleeve. Historians still argue whether most Edo homes had dedicated spaces for specific morning routines, like washing, cooking, or prayers, or whether everyone just used whatever corner wasn't currently occupied by a cousin. You personally operate by the rule: if it's warm, it's mine for 5 minutes. You know the routine. Heat a bit of water, wipe your face with a cloth that smells faintly of the river. Stretch until your joints stop complaining. Then find something to eat, or more likely hope someone else already did. Outside, the faint sounds of the neighborhood drift in. Crows cawing, a wooden gate creaking open, the distant splash of someone pouring out a night bucket. Edo isn't silent. It never really sleeps. But it's slow to wake. Like you. One fringe belief holds that if you wake before the first bell of the local temple, your soul risks slipping back into the dream world and never returning. You've never tested it, but honestly, it would explain your cousin. Still wrapped in your jacket, you crouch by the hearth and wait for the water to boil. It never hurries. You think about the day ahead. Probably chores, probably errands. Definitely a lot of pretending. Not to notice your uncle's terrible jokes. The city awaits. And it doesn't care if you didn't sleep well. The light grows a little brighter. The air a little less icy. And somewhere deep in the wood, beams above, a mouse scurries overhead like it's late for a meeting. Welcome to Edo. Population over 1 million. Heat source 1. Your aunt hums softly as the kettle lets out a faint hiss. The water's finally ready. Not boiling, not even particularly hot, but warm enough to chase the sting out of your fingertips. You take a sip straight from the clay cup and immediately regret it. It tastes like burnt metal and last week's charcoal. But hey, it's liquid and warm, which already puts it ahead of most things this morning. Breakfast is modest, to put it generously. A small bowl of rice, if you're lucky, miso soup with some mystery vegetables, and a single slice of pickled daikon so sour it could end wars. You eat slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because chewing faster doesn't actually help it go down. Beside you, your cousin slurps loudly. Your uncle says something about how the soup was better in his day, then sneezes into his sleeve and goes back to staring at the wall. There's a rhythm to mornings in Edo, and it usually begins with food and ends with someone trying to steal the last bit of fish. Today's protein, a lone grilled sardine. You share it without complaint, mostly because you know the next option is nothing. You sit cross-legged on the tatami floor, back against a wood beam, still cold to the touch. Through the paper screen, you can hear the next house. Over another round of coughing, a baby crying, and the thud of someone who just tripped over a sandal. You're all packed in together, this tightly layered life of wood and rice paper and barely contained noise. Historians still argue whether the typical Edo breakfast was more ceremonial or functional. Was it a daily anchor for spiritual focus, or just fuel before street chaos? Your experience leans toward fuel. Definitely fuel. Especially when your cousin tries to barter his pickled plum for another mouthful of miso and is immediately rejected by your aunt's wooden spoon. You glance over at the fire pit. The ashes need clearing. There's a faint burnt rice smell lingering in the air, yesterday's mistake. Or maybe the day before's. Either way, no one is claiming responsibility. One quirky thing you've come to expect: the rice is always slightly different. Sometimes it's firm and perfect. Other times it has the texture of damp gravel. You suspect it depends on who got to the pot first and how well they remembered to rinse the grains. You learned early not to complain. Complaints are met with stories, long stories. Stories about when rice was rationed by the grain and how your great-grandmother once traded a pair of sandals for a single chestnut. You clean your bowl with the last drops of broth and set it aside. You're not full, but you're done. There's a difference. Now it's time to get moving. You gather your worn obi sash and wrap it around your waist, tying your faded cotton kimono securely. It's indigo-dyed, slightly frayed, and has a curious stain on the left sleeve you've never been able to identify. The sandals by the door are stiff from yesterday's rain. You slip them on anyway. You tug your sleeves tight and prepare to leave. You always hesitate at the door. Not because of what's out there, but because you know the second you open it, the heat you fought so hard for will rush out like a squirrel chased by a cat. But the city waits, and so does your to-do list, which includes not fall in the canal again. You crack the door. Cold air sneaks in like a thief. You hear a vendor shout about seaweed. Someone down the lane is sweeping. The scent of soy sauce hangs in the breeze, mixing oddly with the smell of pickled radish from your own breath. It's refreshing in a way. You step outside. Your sandals squish faintly against the damp street, and your feet remember that straw doesn't really block water. It's a short walk to the neighborhood well and communal cleaning area. Someone's already there, probably bragging about how early they got up. You nod politely. Not because you care, but because this is Edo and everyone cares if you nod politely. One mainstream fact: the Tokugawa government enforced neighborhood accountability. If someone in your block misbehaves, the whole group can be punished. That means smiling, bowing, and absolutely not starting rice drama at the water station. You splash your face with cold water and instantly regret it. It's like being slapped with a frozen fish. You dry off with your sleeve. Hygiene in Edo is relative clean enough to function dirty enough to keep spirits from thinking you're a noble. That's the balance. You chat briefly with a neighbor. They mention something about a fishmonger, fight in the market, and how the tofu sellers' prices have gone up again. You pretend to care. You don't. But it's part of the morning ritual. As you return home, a chicken crosses your path. You stare at it. It stares back. You both silently agree that today's going to be weird. Back home, your uncle is preparing to head out for work or whatever task he's decided qualifies as work today. He's wearing the same dark gray jacket he's had for 10 years. And somehow it looks both too big and too small at the same time. He grumbles something about latrine duty and slips out the door, sandals clacking against the ground like an impatient metronome, which reminds you it's your turn for toilet maintenance. You knew this day would come. You just hoped it wouldn't come today. You gather a bucket, a small broom, and a rag that has seen far too many indignities. The public latrine is down the lane behind a low wooden fence and shaded by a cherry tree that's beautiful in spring and utterly useless now in late autumn. The structure itself is simple, just a squat little shack with a thatched roof, wood plank floor, and 2 openings, one for you, one for the local flies. You step inside, take a breath, and begin the grim work of cleaning what historians generously call one of the most efficient waste systems of the pre-modern world. Here's the wild part. Edo's waste didn't just sit around. It was collected, sold even. Night soil vendors. Yes, that's a real job. made regular rounds to scoop up what the city produced and haul it off to farms on the outskirts. Human waste as fertilizer, a perfect cycle of reuse, and honestly probably cleaner than some modern alleyways you've seen. Still, the experience is vivid. You scrub the floorboards, you sprinkle ash to neutralize the odor, you swat a fly with a broom you named last winter during a particularly grim cleaning session. Its name is Hiroshi. He's seen things. You pause for a moment and lean against the wall. There's a strange quiet in here, the kind that makes you question your life choices. A tiny breeze slips through the gaps in the wall and makes the paper charm above the door flutter. It's meant to ward off bad luck. You wonder if it's working. Historians still argue whether every household had its own latrine, or if sharing one was more common in crowded districts. You live in the sort of neighborhood where you share everything. Buckets, brushes, gossip, and unfortunately smells. You finish up, toss the used water into the drainage channel that runs through the alley, and give Hiroshi a small salute before heading back. The streets are coming alive now. Vendors are wheeling out carts. A dog barks at a passing fishmonger. Somewhere someone drops a basket of leeks and curses in a way that's creative but not technically offensive. The rhythm of Edo is here, clangs, calls, footfalls on wooden boards, and the occasional distant flute. You make it home just as your younger cousin is trying to convince your aunt that cleaning the hearth doesn't fall under his spiritual duties. He's losing badly. You squeeze past and go to the water barrel, dipping your hands in to rinse off the aftermath of your noble latrine adventure. The cold makes your fingers ache all over again. But hey, now you don't smell like death. You just smell like mildly unpleasant charcoal water. Progress. There's still time before you have to run errands, so you sweep the dirt floor around the hearth, shaking dust off the mats, and accidentally uncovering a rice cracker from 2 days ago. You eat it. It's terrible. You eat it anyway. A neighbor knocks on the outer frame of the house and slides open the door just enough to poke her head in. She asks if your family is signed up for street sweeping next week. You lie and say yes. She smiles like she doesn't believe you, which is fair because she definitely shouldn't believe you. One fringe theory you've heard floating around is that the Tokugawa shogunate encouraged excessive cleanliness, not just for hygiene, but as a kind of social control. Clean streets, quiet homes, orderly alleys. It all makes for peaceful subjects. No one has time to revolt when they're busy scrubbing floors. You've considered this during many a cleaning shift, but then you remember rebellion requires energy, and you barely have enough to light the stove. You gather some ash from the hearth to spread outside on the walking path. It helps soak up the moisture and keeps the dirt from turning into a slippery disaster when it rains. Small acts repeated daily, keeping the city livable. There's a pride in it, in a way. You may not have power or money or anything even close to privacy, but you live in a city that doesn't drown in its own filth. That's something. You finish by setting out the family's chamber pot to dry in the sun, a delicate process involving precise angling and a small prayer that no passing child knocks it over. You sit down at the edge of the room, legs tucked under you, and stare at your reflection in the water bucket. You look tired, a bit haunted, but also slightly heroic, like someone who wrestled with a public toilet and emerged victorious. You nod at yourself. Then a pigeon poops on the roof, and it splashes down right in front of you. Edo humbles everyone. You're halfway through folding a damp rag when your older cousin bursts in, flapping his sleeves like a frightened crane and announcing that the neighborhood inspector is making rounds. You freeze mid-fold. The inspector, today of all days. You glance down at your robe, indigo-dyed, yes, but wrinkled like pickled cabbage, and sigh. There's no time to change, so you pat down the worst of the creases, smooth your hair, and pray that your breath doesn't smell like yesterday's radish. Because here's the thing about Edo, your life is not your own. It's shaped, boxed, and stamped according to your status. And in the 1600s, status means everything. Samurai, artisans, merchants, farmers. Each class has its own rules, its own clothes, its own curfews, and yes, its own inspectors who check that you're not stepping outside the invisible fence around your social lane. You're comfortably lodged in the artisan tier, give or take a few suspicious career moves. It means you can't wear silk unless you want to explain yourself to local authorities, and you definitely don't get to carry a sword. That's reserved for the samurai class, who, by the way, are legally allowed to kill you for disrespect, which makes every interaction with one feel like a very tense tea ceremony with a side of potential decapitation. You slip outside, casually sweeping the front of the house like you were born to broom. A few other neighbors are out too, brushing their doorsteps with synchronized panic. Someone lights incense. Someone else yells at a child to stop licking the fence. It's a community effort. The inspector passes by, slowly dressed in drab official robes, and followed by a scribe who looks like he hasn't blinked in a decade. You bow deeply, deeper than you usually bother with. The inspector glances at your sandals, your sleeves, your house, then nods and keeps walking. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Historians still argue whether the strict social dress codes in Edo were mostly enforced through policy or peer pressure. In your experience, it's mostly Aunt Suki 3 doors down who polices your outfits. She once scolded you for wearing patterned socks on a Thursday. You didn't even know that was a rule. Back inside, you swap your outer robe for one with fewer patches. Not because anyone will see you today, but because you will see you. And on the rare chance you pass a mirror or a shiny kettle, you want to look like someone who might have status, if only by accident. Your cousin is already folding up scrolls for delivery. He works for a minor official and spends most of his day pretending to read things he only half understands. He wears a neat teal hakama, the pleated trousers that say, "I'm educated, but not annoyingly so." You glance at your own reflection in the window and try to look philosophical. There's a soft knock on the door frame. It's the tofu vendor. She's early today and her cart is already nearly empty. You exchange a few coins, mon, the little square-holed copper discs that jingle like dried beans, and get a block of tofu so fresh it still jiggles with attitude. You nod politely, offer the tiniest bow, and step aside as a local samurai walks past, robes flowing, sword sheathed at his side. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't have to. His status is carved into every inch of his posture. One mainstream Edo fact: while samurai were the top of the social pyramid, Many by the 1600s had become bureaucrats, less slicing and more sighing over paperwork. But the swords remained, always the swords. You once met a Ronin masterless, broke and very drunk, who tried to trade his blade for your aunt's pickled plum. She declined, firmly, and then made you return the empty sake bottle he left behind. You tucked the tofu away in a cool corner of the house and set about your next task, checking your belongings. You don't have many, but what you do have needs care. Your sandals, still damp. Your lacquered lunchbox, slightly chipped. Your writing brush missing because your cousin borrowed it and then forgot. Again, you peek into the main room where your aunt is spinning thread on a small loom. She hums a tune older than the roof beams and doesn't look up as she speaks. The inspector passed by again. He looked at your sleeves. You nod slowly, waiting to see if she's going to scold you for imagined crimes. And your collar, she adds. Try starching it next time. You want to look like someone who brushes their teeth. You do brush your teeth with charcoal powder and a stick. It's unpleasant and effective and makes your gums feel like they've been interrogated by ninjas. You head out once more this time to run a delivery for the neighbor who paid you in dried persimmons. You don't question it. Dried fruit is currency now. You pass several houses all built with the same lattice wood and sliding doors, all humming with quiet morning energy. Somewhere a kettle whistles. Somewhere else a mother yells at a child about a spilled rice pot. You turn a corner and spot a samurai standing in the middle of the road, staring into space. You bow. He doesn't move. You tiptoe around him like he's part of the scenery. Honestly, he might be. Your final stop is a small shrine where you light a stick of incense and whisper a tiny prayer that today doesn't unravel like mist-threaded silk. The incense curls in thin, slow spirals, vanishing into the morning air as you bow. Once then, again, hands pressed together. You don't always believe the spirits are listening, but you also don't want to test the alternative. Just behind the shrine's bamboo fence, an old woman in saffron robes is sweeping leaves into careful piles, humming a song you're pretty sure is about plum wine and heartbreak. You nod to her. She nods back. No words exchanged, just the quiet understanding that sweeping leaves is endless, and your prayers are probably recycled. Back on the street, the pace of the city is picking up. You tuck your hands into your sleeves for warmth and head toward your next task, checking the neighborhood fire post. It's not glamorous, but in a city made almost entirely of dry wood and oily paper, it's also not optional. Edo burns. A lot. Fires are such a regular part of life that they've earned names like the Flower of Edo. Sounds poetic, right? Until you realize that flower blooms by devouring entire city blocks. Every household in your ward belongs to a fire brigade, and every able-bodied adult is expected to pitch in when things go up in smoke. You arrive at the corner fire station, a glorified shed with buckets, hooks, and long bamboo poles for pulling down burning roofs. You do a quick check, bucket handles intact. Ropes coiled, the ceremonial bell still tied up in faded red ribbon. You make a mental note that the water tub needs refilling. Again, it's always low, because nobody wants to carry water uphill unless something is actually on fire. Historians still argue whether Edo's constant fires were due more to poor construction, cooking accidents, or just the sheer density of people living in flammable matchboxes. Probably all three. The fire that destroyed half the city in 1657 rumored to have started from a single temple lantern. One lantern. That's all it takes. You remember the last blaze, how the sky went orange, how your aunt screamed for the water ladle, how someone accidentally flung a sandal at a passing patrol officer. You didn't sleep for days after that. Now even the smell of charred rice sends your heart racing. Your job today is simple: walk the block and make sure nothing looks like it's about to catch fire. You check that people haven't left straw mats too close to open flames, that the paper lanterns have enough oil but not too much, and crucially that no one is drying seaweed on their rooftop again. You'd be surprised how flammable seaweed becomes when left in direct sun for 6 hours. Or maybe you wouldn't. You tap your wooden clappers together at every turn. Yoshiki, they're called. A sharp talk-talk sound meant to alert residents and remind them that, yes, their homes can become tinderboxes if they don't stop cooking while half asleep. You walk slowly, deliberately enjoying the rhythm, the echo, the way the city listens and adjusts. Your cousin once tried to skip fire patrol, got caught napping behind the bathhouse. As punishment, he had to recite fire safety proverbs for 2 hours in front of the elders while holding a bucket full of wet sand. He doesn't nap outside anymore. You stop in front of a narrow alley and squint upward. A small paper lantern flaps in the breeze, tied to a bamboo post with twine that looks suspiciously old. You knock gently on the door below. A merchant opens it with a guilty expression, sees your clappers, and sighs. You point to the lantern. He nods, takes it down, and mutters something about his apprentice being part fire spirit, part fool. You continue your route. Each home you pass is a variation on a theme: low eaves, lattice windows, thatch or tile roofs, and a stack of firewood that never seems quite dry enough. Still, the residents are cautious. Everyone knows what's at stake. One quirky little tradition: some families keep charms above their doors with brush-painted prayers against fire, sometimes reinforced with sea salt or tiny bells. You saw one once that had a full poem written in microscopic script. Supposedly reading it out loud fast enough would summon water from the sky. You tried. It didn't. After your round, you return to the shed and report that all is well. The elder on duty nods without looking up from his tea. You're dismissed. On your way back, you pass a house with smoke curling from a vent in the roof. Not alarming smoke, just miso soup on the boil. Still, you pause. You remember that time your aunt left a pot of sweet potatoes over the coals and burned them so thoroughly the smell lingered until the next full moon. When you finally return home, your aunt is crouched beside the hearth, ladling broth into small bowls. She hands you one without comment, but the look in her eyes says, "Good job, not letting the neighborhood burn down." You take the bowl and sit cross-legged. Your cousin sneaks some rice from your plate. You ignore it. You're too tired to fight over 3 grains. Later, as the sky begins to dim, The neighborhood patrol passes by. They're early tonight. Wooden clappers, firm footsteps. A shouted reminder. Hi, no Yujin. Fire awareness. Everyone listens. You set out a fresh dish of water by the entryway. A humble ritual meant to symbolically invite calm. You light a tiny bit of sandalwood incense. It's not much, but it smells like peace. You lie back on your mat for a moment, arms behind your head, listening to the wind move through the paper screens, and wondering if the city will make it through the night without any flare-ups, literal or otherwise. You're just about to nod off when the paper door shutters. Gently, someone's knocking with the kind of urgency that suggests either a fire or a very complicated neighbor issue. You shuffle over, slide it open, and find one of the local boys standing in the frame, breathless, clutching a folded note. His eyes dart side to side like he's expecting a ninja to leap from your compost bin. It's from the magistrate's runner, he says, pressing the note into your hand before bolting back down the alley like a startled squirrel. You stare at the paper. Not official, but official adjacent, meaning it came from someone who's very good at pretending to be unimportant. You unfold the note and squint at the kanji written in quick brushstrokes, probably by someone standing up, glancing over their shoulder. The message is vague, of course. It usually is. Reports of unusual movements, stay alert, say nothing. You sigh. You were really hoping to spend this evening reorganizing the firewood and pretending to stretch? Edo's like that, always watching, always whispering. On the surface, it's orderly, serene, bowing and rituals and morning sweepers who clean the streets better than most modern cities. But underneath, there's a quiet, tight-laced paranoia that pulses through the alleys like steam from a kettle. You step outside for air, pretending to adjust your sandal strap while you glance down the street. Two women chat near the well. A dog barks at nothing. Everything looks normal. But then again, it always does. Welcome to surveillance, Edo style. The shogun's rule might not involve CCTV cameras or smartphones, but it does involve people, lots of people who notice everything. The Metsuke inspectors of the Tokugawa regime are the shogun's eyes and ears. They blend in like background characters, then casually destroy your life if you say something dumb at a bathhouse. Add in informants, hood gossips, and your aunt's uncanny ability to overhear everything, and you've got the 17th century version of a security state. Historians still argue whether Edo's spy networks were tightly controlled or just an elaborate case of social anxiety weaponized into governance. You suspect it's both. After all, your uncle once got a formal warning for making a joke about rice portions being smaller under the shogunate. A joke about rice. You step back inside, sliding the door shut behind you with a soft snick, and stash the note beneath the edge of a tatami mat. Your cousin eyes you with suspicion, but you distract him with a piece of dried persimmon. Works every time. The city's design itself plays into the surveillance game. Roads twist and double back. Gates close after dark. Even the districts are arranged by occupation and social tier so that everyone knows when someone doesn't belong. You once saw a merchant try to wander into the samurai quarter. 5 minutes later, 2 guards and a monk had him cornered, asking why he was wearing slippers that fancy. There's a curfew bell that rings each evening from the local temple, and once it sounds, gatekeepers shut the wooden barriers between wards. If you're caught out after dark without a solid excuse, good luck. The best case scenario is being dragged back to your house with a warning. Worst case, you get labeled a suspicious element. And in Edo, that's not just a social stigma. It's practically an early retirement. You remember one time a man was reported for walking the same street every evening for 2 weeks. Turned out he just liked the view. Didn't matter. He was questioned, relocated, and his sandals were confiscated for investigative purposes. One fringe tidbit you heard from a traveling ink vendor: some believe that shadows lingering too long in one alley mean a spy has marked it with a curse. Another theory: they're just long shadows, but you avoid those alleys anyway. Why tempt fate? You spend the next hour rearranging the kitchen corner, moving firewood, and brushing off old scrolls you never read. Anything to look occupied if someone drops by unannounced. That's the thing no one announces. They observe, then they ask. And if your answers are too fast, too slow, or too cheerful, they make notes. Your cousin wanders over and starts asking pointed questions about the note you definitely didn't just hide under the mat. You smile, offer him another dried persimmon, and tell him it was a love letter. He blinks, then recoils like you just admitted to kissing a tax collector. Gross, he says, and shuffles off. Victory. Night begins to fall. You hear the conchicachine rhythm of a street performer's drums in the distance, followed by the gentle jangle of a noodle vendor's bell. The world softens. Lights glow behind paper screens. Shadows lengthen, but the air feels different tonight, taut. Like a bowstring, just slightly drawn. You lock the door. Not because you think anything will happen, but because this is Edo. And everything happens eventually. As the final curfew bell rings in the temple tower, you roll out your futon. The paper walls glow amber from the neighbor's lantern. You stare at the ceiling, counting each creak of the beams, each rustle of wind against the frame, each possible footstep in the alley outside. You won't sleep easily tonight. But then again, neither will anyone else. You wake just before sunrise, not because you've rested well, but because the rooster 3 houses down has decided to scream his opinion of the moon. Again. Your eyes open to soft, gray light leaking through the paper windows and the faint smell of burnt miso from the neighbor's breakfast fire. Today is water duty. You sit up slowly. Your back cracks in protest. Your arms ache from yesterday's chores. And yet water duty waits for no one. In Edo, if you want to drink clean, cook, or not be accused of sorcery by a particularly dramatic cousin, you fetch the water. The neighborhood well sits at the edge of the commons past the row of houses that all look identical until you start remembering who has the loud dog and who burns incense that smells like salted mushrooms. You gather your bucket, wooden, round, heavy when full, and your ladle and wrap your scarf tighter before heading out. The early morning air bites. Not a gentle nip. A full set of winter teeth right down your collar. You wish for gloves or mittens or hands made of warm stone. But all you have are sleeves, friction, and the will to survive. The path crunches under your feet. Frost on the wooden planks. Someone's already out sweeping. A man in a faded russet robe nods to you and keeps pushing fallen leaves toward nowhere in particular. A cat darts past, carrying something in its mouth. You decide not to investigate. The well itself is surrounded by stones, darkened from centuries of splashes. You drop the bucket down the rope, creaking the echo of water below, reminding you that this city runs not on rice or rules, but on clean, cold water. You pull, slowly, carefully. The bucket rises with a groan and a slosh. You grip it with both hands, muscles burning, and set it on the edge. Some water spills over and soaks your sleeve. Of course. Historians still argue whether early Edo water systems were more efficient than their European counterparts. All you know is nobody in your house has cholera and the water doesn't smell like feet. So that's a win. You carry the full bucket home, walking carefully to avoid slipping. Edo's streets are cleaner than you'd expect for a wooden metropolis of 1 million people, thanks to strict neighborhood cleaning rotations and, more importantly, shame. Lots of communal shame. No one wants to be that house, the one with trash in the gutter, the one that makes the block look bad, the one Aunt Suki talks about while pretending not to talk about it. You enter your house with the grace of a hero returning from war. No one claps. Your cousin glances up from his scroll, unimpressed. Your aunt points toward the hearth with her ladle. You take the bucket there, pour some water into the pot, and wipe your hands on the rag near the doorway. It's damp. It's always damp. Water isn't just for tea and hygiene, it's fire insurance too. Every household keeps a full container near the kitchen in case the cooking fire goes rogue. You remember the time your cousin decided to try grilling eels indoors? The flames reached the ceiling, the eel screamed, your uncle screamed, you screamed, you all agreed to pretend it never happened. One fringe belief holds that whispering kind words to your water before boiling it makes it softer and better for digestion. Your aunt whispers to hers. You tried it once and ended up making the water cry. Or maybe that was steam. You take a small scoop for washing your face, dabbing it onto your skin with a cloth that smells faintly of mildew and ash. The chill snaps you awake faster than any coffee ever could, if coffee even existed in your life, which it does not. Instead, you have determination, tepid barley tea, and the occasional miracle of hot bath water. Sometimes when you're lucky and the air is just right, you can see the thin steam rising from someone's kettle and feel momentarily soothed. Other times your fingers are so cold you have to jam them into the coals for 5 seconds and then pretend you didn't. The pigs out back grunt from their corner pen and you sigh. Animal care is next, which of course means more water. The pig only drinks lukewarm, and the chickens require their troughs scrubbed or they start flinging feathers in protest. You refill the bucket and trek back out again, past the same man sweeping who has now moved exactly 5 leaves. You think he's pacing himself for dramatic effect. At the well, you're joined by another neighbor, an old woman carrying 2 buckets, balanced across her shoulders with a bamboo yoke. She looks at you, squints, then asks if your household is the one with the loud radish pickling barrel. You confirm. She laughs, spits in the weeds, and mutters something about spirits needing salt too. You help her draw her water because that's what people do in Edo. Help when it's asked. Ignore when it's not. And never ask too many questions, unless you want to be discussed at someone else's dinner. You both walk back in silence. The city is waking now. Vendors calling children, shrieking the hammer of someone fixing a door. You pass the fire post. Again, glance up at the sky. Pale blue today, rare, beautiful. A good omen, maybe? You arrive home, set the bucket down, and rub your arms. Your aunt hands you a warm cup. Not tea, just warm water. But somehow it tastes like comfort. You're halfway through your cup of warm water, which now feels luxurious, by the way, when your aunt announces it's bath day. You stare at her, blinking slowly. It's not a question. It's a decree. Your cousin groans. Your uncle vanishes. But you know there's no escape. Because in Edo, missing your turn at the communal bathhouse is not just unwise. It's noted. And then gossiped about. You gather your bath things, if you can call them that. A small towel, a wooden bucket, a bar of soap, someone carved into the shape of a fish. It no longer resembles a fish, and a change of underlayers that still smell faintly of chestnuts. You wrap it all in a cloth bundle and head out. The bathhouse is just a few alleys away past the rice vendor and the fortune teller who always tells you the same thing. Avoid spicy foods. Watch your steps. You're still not sure if she's a mystic or just really into digestion. The bathhouse stands tall with its curved tile roof and rising steam snaking out from vents. It's busy today. Of course, it's always busy. Edo has a lot of people and very little personal space, and that includes when you're naked and trying not to make eye contact. You remove your sandals, step onto the wooden threshold, and bow to the attendant, who's been there since you were old enough to splash. She nods with the solemnity of a gatekeeper to a steamy, slightly awkward paradise. Inside, the air is thick with humidity, the scent of cedar planks and mineral water clinging to every surface. You undress quickly because lingering invites commentary, and place your folded robe in the designated cubby. Then it's time for the washing. In Edo, you never get in the tub dirty. That's sacred water, shared water. You squat on a low stool, dip your bucket, and begin the scrub down. Cold water first. Soap second. Scrubbing like your honor depends on it, which in some ways it does. Nobody wants to be remembered as that person with elbow grime. Historians still argue whether bathhouses in Edo were more social hubs or necessary hygiene stations. You've been in enough to know it's both. You can't escape the conversation or the judgmental looks from old ladies who pretend not to be watching your washing technique. You sneak a glance around. The room is full, shoulders, hunched backs, shiny with water laughter echoing off the tiled walls. Some men talk politics, others recite poetry. One guy just keeps humming the same song about sweet potatoes. You rinse thoroughly. Then finally you step into the hot water. And for a moment the world fades. The heat wraps around your bones like a blanket, woven from clouds and molten rice. Your muscles sigh. Your brain melts. You sit very still, afraid that if you move, the spell will break. A man nearby is explaining that soaking your feet in warm water opens your heart to forgiveness. Someone else mumbles, that warm water opens your pores and your wallet. They both nod, as if agreeing. One quirky superstition you've heard. Some believe that if you fall asleep in the bath, your soul might wander too far and forget to come back, which is why you sit upright and blink often, just in case. Eventually, your cousin joins you in the tub, wincing dramatically as he sinks in. "It's too hot," he says. You say nothing. You're too relaxed to argue or care. A few moments later, a stranger climbs in. He makes polite conversation about the price of pickled plums and the scandal at the Kabuki theater. You nod, smile, and offer exactly 3 neutral responses. That's the rule: friendly, not nosy; curious, never creepy. You glance at the small wooden plank hanging on the wall with a painted proverb: "Clean body calm, mind no gossip." It's decorative. Everyone ignores it. After 20 heavenly minutes, you know it's time to get out. Staying too long makes you dizzy, and also pruny, which your aunt says is an insult to the ancestors. You step out, dripping, and begin drying with your tiny towel, which is comically inadequate. You've mastered the art of rotating it like a pastry brush, dabbing instead of wiping, until you're just dry enough to not be slippery. You redress slowly, your skin still steaming. Your robe feels fresh, your hair is damp, and you finally understand why bath day is sacred. Even if the water was shared, the gossip rampant, and your cousin definitely sang off-key. Outside, the cool air hits your face like a pleasant slap. You breathe deeply. The street smells better now. Rice cedar, a faint trace of incense from a nearby shop. You stop by a small stall to buy a steamed bun. It's hot and filled with sweet red bean paste. You eat it slowly, savoring each bite like it's the only meal you've ever had. The vendor gives you a knowing nod. He saw you come out of the bathhouse. Everyone does. You are now officially that clean person, at least for the next 6 hours. As you walk back, shoulders loose, face glowing, and stomach warm, you think this is how the rich must feel all the time. Then you trip on a stone stub, your toe, and remember, no, this is still Edo, and you are still very much you. You're almost home when your aunt intercepts you with a look that says, "No, you're not done yet." She's standing in the doorway, holding a small cloth pouch and a list, scribbled in clumsy brush strokes. You know what's coming before she says it. "Market run," she says. Don't forget the tofu this time, the firm kind. You nod solemnly, accepting your fate. The pouch jingles faintly, 6 copper mon, and a wooden token from a vendor who still owes your family a discount after that fermented soybean incident. You tuck it into your sleeve and start walking toward the Market Street sandals clicking against the wooden boards. The market's already awake. Edo never truly sleeps, but by mid-morning it's fully alert, shouting, steaming, bartering. You turn a corner and walk into a wall of sound. A fishmonger yells about freshest catch beside a woman selling pickled radish in every shade of regret. The smell is overpowering. Soy brine grilled eel and what might be seaweed or might be disappointment. Your first stop, tofu. You squeeze through a cluster of shoppers eyeing the rows of tofu blocks on display. Soft, firm, extra firm, the tofu hierarchy is surprisingly political. You point to the correct one and hold up the wooden token. The vendor squints at you like he's evaluating your soul, then hands over the tofu with exaggerated reluctance. Historians still argue whether bartering and tokens in Edo were more efficient than coin exchange, or just a clever way for vendors to avoid taxes. Either way, you're now holding tofu with the texture of cold memory and the weight of a family's dinner on your shoulders. Next, seaweed, dried anchovies, and if there's any money left, one of those little sweet buns filled with red bean paste. The key to market shopping in Edo is not looking too desperate. If you look hungry, prices rise. If you look too smug, the good stuff vanishes. It's a social dance performed in sandals and dictated by how loudly the vendors yell your name. You pass a tea merchant shouting about his miracle blend that cures melancholy and minor curses. You almost believe him. Then you see the price and remember your budget includes exactly one miracle, and it better be tofu. You're scanning the spice cart when a street performer starts juggling polished stones nearby. A small crowd gathers. You pause, pulled in by the rhythm, the laughter, the absurdity. For a moment, it feels like you're in a story that isn't yours. Just a face in a crowd watching polished stones fly like spinning moons. One stone slips. It lands with a thud beside a vendor's basket. No harm done, but the vendor starts shouting anyway. The performer bows dramatically, hands raised. The crowd disperses with a mix of giggles and shrugs. Show's over. You continue down the lane, passing rows of lacquerware, bundles of firewood, and bundles of gossip. A pair of women trade rumors near the bathhouse tokens. Something about a kabuki actor, a broken fan, and someone's missing slipper. You nod as you pass, pretending not to listen, while listening intently. One quirky fact: kabuki actors in Edo were often more famous than some government officials. People would queue for hours just to catch a glimpse, whisper their names in alleys, and copy their makeup with startling accuracy. The downside scandal followed them like flies on fermented beans. You stop at a dumpling stall, scan your remaining coins, and make the executive decision. Dumpling now, disappointment later. You point. The vendor hands over one warm golden ball of sweet dough. You bite into it and sigh. Perfection. You pass a small temple alcove tucked behind the market stalls, where someone's left a tiny offering. Half a rice cracker and a neatly folded paper crane. You pause to admire the craftsmanship. The crane is delicate, sharp-winged, balanced on the edge of the shrine like it might fly if the wind picked up just right. You bow briefly, just in case the spirits are paying attention. You've had a pretty good dumpling. Might as well hedge your bets. You start heading home, bag now, heavier coin pouch, much lighter. The alley twists through a few back lanes, quieter than the main road. Here, the city breathes differently. Less shouting, more sweeping. A woman sits cross-legged by her doorway, mending a sleeve with practiced grace. A child chases a chicken with no real intent. You step aside as a vendor wheels a cart of firewood, past singing a song about snow and bad in-laws. Historians still debate whether Edo's markets were entirely local or if some goods came from far-off provinces, smuggled in or shipped downriver. You're more concerned about whether this tofu is going to leak on your sleeve. You make it home just as your aunt is kneeling by the hearth, stirring a pot. She raises an eyebrow. You raise the tofu. She nods once and mutters, "At least someone understands firmness." Your cousin appears just in time to sniff the air and ask if you got sweet buns. You tell him no. You lie. He doesn't deserve the dumpling. You unpack the rest. Anchovies check. Seaweed check. Crumbled dignity check. She pats your shoulder, which is basically a standing ovation in this house. Later, you sit by the doorway, watching the sunlight hit the edge of the tatami mat, feeling your stomach warm from food you haven't even eaten yet. The market was loud. The tofu was heavy. But you're home. And for now, you're full of sweet dumpling secrets and slightly smug satisfaction. You're lounging by the doorway, letting the sun warm your knees through the paper screen, when your aunt appears again, this time holding a small folded letter tied with red string and looking suspiciously like an errand. You reach for it slowly, as if it might explode. She pats your head with the affection of someone who has no intention of letting you enjoy your afternoon. "You'll take this to the scribe's clerk," she says. "He's by the canal near the barley shop. Don't drop it in the water this time." You nod solemnly. One time. You drop a letter one time, and no one lets it go. The letter feels important, heavier than it looks. Probably a marriage negotiation, or a rice loan, or some dramatic poetry exchange. You tuck it safely into your sleeve, double wrap your robe sash, and head off again. You tell yourself this counts as exercise. Edo doesn't have gyms. It has couriers. The streets are quieter now that it's past the peak of the day. A few merchants still holler about half-price dried squid, but most are packing up, sweeping, or napping behind their carts. You pass a man snoring upright under a banner that reads "Best vinegar in town," which may or may not be true depending on how you feel about vinegar and snoring. You cross the main footbridge, pausing to watch the canal for a moment. A flat-bottomed boat glides beneath you, guided by a long pole and a man who looks half asleep. The water shimmers, flecked with sunlight and the occasional floating leaf. You resist the urge to toss in a pebble. You're trying to keep your sleeves dry today. Messages in Edo are serious business. While high-ranking officials might have access to mounted couriers or fast boats, the rest of you hustle through alleys with string-tied letters, hoping no chickens interfere. One mainstream Edo fact runner's hikyaku could travel incredible distances in remarkably short time. There were entire relay systems with changing stations, like postal marathons with sandals and back pain. You reach the scribe's district, quieter, ink-stained, and somehow always smelling faintly of old paper and simmered roots. You duck under a low archway and knock at the clerk's door. A boy answers, maybe 10 years old, with ink on his hands and an expression that says, "I've seen too much." You hand over the letter. He nods gravely and disappears inside without a word. Delivery complete. You're about to turn back when a loud squawk breaks the silence. A chicken. Yes. Another one comes barreling down the alley, pursued by a red-faced man in split-toe socks and no apparent sense of balance. You flatten yourself against the wall just in time as the bird veers left. The man veers right, and somewhere a ceramic bowl shatters in protest. You don't ask questions. You just move on. One fringe tidbit you once overheard at a tea stall: Some couriers supposedly tied charms to their ankles for speed, blessed by mountain priests. You tied a string once for good luck. It made your foot itch, so you took it off. You make a detour on the way home through the southern market lane. There's a narrow stall that sells paper thin, pale, and pressed so precisely it rustles like wind. You watch as a customer tests the ink with a brushstroke. One motion. Clean. Perfect. You don't buy any. But you think about it. You stop by a noodle vendor and stare longingly at the pot of steaming broth. You have no money, but you inhale as deeply as one can without looking suspicious. The vendor gives you a side glance. You nod respectfully and walk away with dignity, which is hard to do on an empty stomach. Back through the alleys, you pause to adjust your sandal strap. It's coming loose again. You tie it with a bit of reed from a broom leaning nearby and wonder not for the first time why shoelaces haven't been invented yet, probably because then your aunt wouldn't have anything to scold you about. You cross a second bridge near the canal's bend, and that's when you feel the breeze change, cooler, hints of smoke. You stop, sniff, listen. Then you hear it a distant crackle. You look toward the rooftops and spot a thin trail of gray rising near the eastern edge. Fire, small for now. But fires in Edo don't stay small. You're not near your neighborhood, but the protocol is clear. You reach into the communal warning box at the bridge post, pull out the bamboo hyoshigi, and smack them together in rhythm. Toke, talk, 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 sharp, deliberate. The few people nearby turn immediately. One man drops his basket of daikon. A woman clutches her baby tighter. No panic yet. Just preparation. Soon others pick up the call. More hyoshigi from the next post. And the next. Historians still argue whether Edo's fire response was more effective because of its organization or its communal fear. You're betting it's both. You don't stay to fight the fire, it's not your district. But you watch long enough to make sure the signal has spread, the buckets are moving, the guards are on alert. Then you slip away, sandals slapping the boards, heart beating a little faster. You arrive home just as the sun tips toward late afternoon. Your aunt is stirring something in the pot again. Your cousin is trying to convince a neighbor that the chicken who broke the bowl looked exactly like ours, but wasn't. You sit down, roll your shoulders, and exhale. You delivered the letter, you avoided the chicken, you raised the fire alert, and your sandals only fell apart once. That in Edo is practically a holiday. The sun is inching westward now, casting long amber streaks through the paper windows and turning everything inside your house into silhouettes with secrets. You're curled beside the hearth trying to warm your toes again, because no matter what season it is, your toes are always cold when your aunt nudges you with the business end of the broom. Temple's expecting the charms by sundown, she says, and don't forget the incense. You give her your best. I just got back face. She gives you her best I do not care face. Hers wins as always. You rise with the creak of ancient joints that are absolutely too young to creak, like that dust off your robe, and scoop up the cloth bundle, holding 2 protective charms and a packet of rice paper slips. It's time for another kind of errand spiritual insurance. The local temple isn't far, nestled in a bamboo grove on a small hill that doesn't feel so small when you're hauling yourself up it in straw sandals. The steps are uneven, worn down by generations of cautious feet and the occasional runaway dog. You pass the first stone marker, carved with a barely visible fox and bow slightly, just in case. No one ever regrets being polite to stone foxes. Halfway up, you pause to catch your breath. The air smells like dry leaves, sandalwood, and the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts from a vendor you can't quite see. You consider turning back for snacks, but spiritual errands outrank food in your aunt's eyes. Barely. You reach the top and find the temple gates open, flanked by two wooden statues of lion dogs, mid-snarl. They're meant to scare away bad spirits, but you swear one of them just sneezed. You bow again and step into the courtyard. A monk greets you with a nod. He's sweeping as monks always seem to be, and you wonder if there's a secret rule that their enlightenment is directly tied to broom count. You hand over the charms, which will be hung on the prayer board for safekeeping until they're replaced during the next festival. One mainstream Edo-backed temples weren't just places of worship, they were central hubs for community life, emergency shelter during fires, even mail stops for certain neighborhoods. If your cousin disappears for a few hours, odds are good he's napping behind the incense burner pretending to meditate. You light a stick of incense, thick, herbal, and slightly overwhelming. The smoke curls upward in a lazy spiral, and you whisper a tiny, non-committal prayer. Something vague like, keep the pigs healthy, or no fires this week. You don't want to get greedy. There's an offering box beside the main hall. You toss in a coin, one of your own this time, not from the house pouch. You're not trying to earn favor exactly, just covering your bases. Edo's full of corners. Some of them feel watched. A small group gathers to tie Ima wooden prayer plaques onto the shrine fence. You stop to read a few. Some wish for good harvest, some for a child, some for forgiveness from a fox spirit. One simply says, please let the fish return. You sincerely hope it works. One fringe belief floating around your neighborhood is that writing your fears backward on a rice paper slip and burning it in temple ash will banish them. You tried it once. The fire sputtered. Your cousin claimed that meant your fears were too stubborn. You're still not sure if he meant that as comfort or critique. As you leave, you grab a new household talisman from the donation table, a rectangle of paper stamped with protective kanji. You tuck it carefully into your sleeve. Your aunt will hang it above the door, maybe add some pine sprigs, then scold you for being gone too long. You descend the hill slowly, eyes on the crooked steps. The wind picks up rustling the bamboo like gossip through paper screens. A crow squawks somewhere off to the left, and you instinctively glance upward. Crows are clever, and in Edo, they're considered both omens and trash collectors. You respect their hustle. Back in the street, the shadows are longer and the air cooler. People walk with more purpose now. Time is running out before curfew. You pass a mother clutching a toddler and a bundle of firewood. A merchant locking his stall, fumbling with a latch that's clearly too clever for its own good. You pause outside a charm vendor's stall, just long enough to admire a beautifully embroidered amulet meant to guard against foot injuries and marriage proposals. You don't have enough money for it, but you appreciate its practicality. As you near home, you feel the temple scent still clinging to your robe. Smoke, ash, that oddly comforting mix of mystery and mildew. You like it. It's like wearing a whisper. You enter the house quietly. Your aunt takes the talisman without a word, fingers it for a second, then nods and climbs up to hang it over the lintel with a short strand of twine and that one nail that always comes loose during storms. Your cousin is trying to light the evening lamp with damp wicks and mild profanity. You sit beside him, offering no help, just presence. The flame sputters, flares, and finally settles into a warm flicker that softens everything around it. You close your eyes for a second, just breathing in. Smoke, steam, ink, dust, life. Outside, the wind carries the low, distant chime of a bell. The temple's closing its gates, spirits secured, charms delivered, incense burned, for now Edo is at peace. Your almost comfortable legs tucked beneath you, belly gently full from a dinner of barley rice and something that may have once been a fish, when your little cousin barrels in like a miniature typhoon made of elbows and half-braided hair. The goat is standing on the roof again, she announces entirely without context or urgency. You blink. You look at your aunt. She sighs. No one moves. Because this is just life. Children in Edo are everywhere. Small, loud, often sticky, and always up to something. And while they aren't given center stage in the history scrolls, they're the background noise of daily life pattering feet. Sudden giggles and questions that no one wants to answer. You get up because someone has to. Outside, the last of the daylight casts the rooftops in orange and gray. And there she is, the goat, on the roof, staring at you like you're the one who's made a mistake. Historians still argue whether Edo children were formally schooled in any widespread way. While samurai children and wealthy merchant families often had tutors, most kids learned from parents' apprenticeships or by just surviving. You suspect goats were not part of the curriculum. You try coaxing the goat down with a handful of rice husks. She looks vaguely interested, then loses interest and begins nibbling on the neighbor's thatch. Your cousin offers zero assistance and instead starts chasing a cricket with the intensity of a ninja on a mission. You eventually rescue the goat using a broom, a stern tone of voice, and a leftover dumpling from your pocket. You don't ask how long it's been there. It still works. Back inside, the children are now playing ohajiki, a game involving flicking small glass beads across the tatami. You join them mostly because it's either that or help with washing up. The beads clatter, someone cheats, someone sulks. A small war breaks out, which ends with a broken chopstick and a very stern glare from your aunt. Edo parenting relies on a mix of tolerance, intimidation, and deep communal effort. Everyone raises everyone. If your neighbor's child does something terrible, you discipline them as if they were your own. And if your cousin gets caught stealing pickled radish from the storehouse again, you pretend you don't know him until his punishment is over. One fringe superstition. Some households sew tiny bells into children's sleeves to keep away bad spirits. Your aunt tried that once. It lasted half a day. The noise drove her to the edge, and she yanked the bells out with a muttered curse about inviting spirits on purpose. After dinner, the kids gather around the hearth again, this time for storytelling. Your uncle clears his throat dramatically, which means it's time for one of those tales, the kind where a hungry monk outsmarts a demon or a fox spirit turns into a beautiful woman and teaches someone a lesson about rice etiquette. Tonight's story is about a boy who befriends a ghost that lives in a water jar. The ghost is sad because no one brings it pickles. The moral is unclear, but everyone claps at the end, especially the smallest cousin who doesn't fully grasp the plot, but appreciates the ghost sound effects. Children in Edo don't have toys like the ones you see today. There are no blinking lights or plastic warriors, just tops spun on flat boards, dolls carved from old wood scraps, chalk drawings on alley walls, and frogs. So many frogs. You once found a child trying to teach a frog to write kanji. It was going poorly. One of the older kids announces that she's building a raft. In a city where canals run like veins, this is both exciting and mildly dangerous. You nod seriously and advise her to test it with a bucket of rocks first. She looks at you like you're the smartest person in the world. Your aunt hands you a baby. You don't ask why. She doesn't explain. The baby stares at you with profound suspicion, then sneezes directly onto your robe. You count this as a blessing. Why not? Later, when things have quieted and the children are drifting toward their sleeping corners, like leaves in a gentle stream, you help set out their bedding. Thin mats, woven blankets, one pillow that is definitely more rice than softness. They huddle in clusters, whispering in the dark about tomorrow's chores and whose turn it is to guard the sweet potatoes. You slip one of the older kids a sliver of roasted chestnut as a reward for not lighting anything on fire today. She bows with exaggerated grace. You tell her to pass it on to the others. She does not. Historians sometimes wonder how children in Edo adapted to the rigid social structures around them. You've seen it up close. Kids conform when needed, but give them a stick and a patch of mud, and they create entire kingdoms. Rules bend. Games evolve. Imagination rules the moment. Before bed, one of the boys asks you if frogs ever get lonely. You think about it, then answer, only the ones who never learn to swim. He nods solemnly and falls asleep, hugging his wooden sword. Outside, the wind shifts. The goat has returned to her corner. The night breathes a little softer. Inside, the future of Edo snores. You wake to the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water on the roof, soft. At first, then louder as the rain picks up speed and confidence. A typhoon. Not quite, just a stubborn autumn downpour, the kind that floods alleys, dampens spirits, and makes everyone in Edo collectively sigh while reaching for another layer of cloth. Your mat is a little damp on one corner. Again. You scoot to the other side like it'll make a difference. It doesn't. The thatch above your head leaks in two places and creaks ominously with each gust of wind. Somewhere in the corner, your cousin mutters in his sleep about seaweed. You decide not to ask. The fire in the eye-rory has long since faded to embers. You poke at it, but the charcoal's too wet to revive without serious coaxing, and you're not in the mood to sweet-talk firewood. Instead, you wrap yourself tighter in your robe and begin planning your day with the grim efficiency of someone who already knows half of it will be spent avoiding puddles. Rain in Edo is a mixed blessing. It cleans the streets, fills the cisterns, and makes the tea taste slightly better. But it also turns wooden sidewalks into slippery disasters and floods canals just enough to make the boats stall in awkward places. You remember the time a neighbor's delivery of pickled vegetables floated away mid-delivery. For weeks, people along the canal reported mysterious barrels and a strong, vinegary scent. Historians still argue whether Edo's drainage systems were actually advanced for the time or simply barely adequate. You lean toward the latter, especially on days like today, when the alley near the tofu shop becomes a small, angry river. You're supposed to pick up miso from the vendor 2 streets over. You consider writing a haiku about it instead, and hoping that counts. Something like rain mocks my journey. The miso waits, unimpressed. I trip on a frog. Eventually, duty wins. You wrap your legs in extra cloth, secure your straw sandals with a bit of twine, and grab the oil paper umbrella from behind the door. It's patched crooked and possibly haunted by the ghost of a retired paper merchant, but it keeps the worst of the rain off your head. The streets are oddly quiet. Just the sound of rainfall tapping against rooftops, and the occasional splash of someone stepping in a puddle deeper than expected. You pass a cart covered with a tarp, a dog hiding underneath it, and a pair of children floating a tiny wooden boat down the gutter like it's a grand canal barge. You make it to the miso shop with only one near slip and a definite splash that soaks your right foot. The vendor is already sweeping water away from his stall, grumbling about soup from the sky. He hands you the miso in a wrapped bundle and tells you to walk fast. You thank him and immediately ignore the advice, walking slow and steady to avoid falling on your tail. One quirky old belief says that rain carries the laughter of ancestors, that when it trickles down the edges of rooftops, it's actually old voices reminding you not to complain so much. You try to keep that in mind as your sandal squishes unpleasantly with every step. Back at home, your cousin is waiting at the door with a towel. You pretend it's gratitude. He pretends he didn't just use it to wipe his own face. The fire has been coaxed back to life, and your aunt is stirring a pot with that particular elbow-wrist rhythm that says, "This stew will fix everything." You unwrap the miso and pass it over. She nods, then gestures to the corner where a bucket has been catching drips from the ceiling. It's full. You dump it outside, narrowly missing the goat who gives you a look that could curdle milk. Rain means indoor work. Today, mending folding, arguing softly about nothing in particular. Your uncle decides it's the perfect moment to retell the story of how he once outran a thunderstorm with nothing but a straw hat and blind faith. No one believes him. Everyone listens anyway. You spend the afternoon fixing a tear in your robe, sewing slowly, fingers stiff from damp air. The thread tangles, Your needle squeaks through the fabric, and the whole thing smells faintly of mildew and effort. Outside, the rain continues. It drums on the roof like distant taiko drums, steady, low, soothing. If you close your eyes and pretend it's not soaking your firewood pile, you sip tea brewed from roasted barley and feel something like calm settle into your bones. By evening, the rain lightens. The sky turns a bruised violet gray, and the neighbor's rooster, confused by the dim light, makes a half-hearted caw. You hang your robe near the fire to dry and change into your emergency robe. The one with the patch, shaped like a crescent moon. Your cousin calls it the sad kimono. You call it functional. One fringe superstition floats back into your memory. Some say if you sleep through a full day of rain, your spirit leaves your body to explore the dreams of others. You don't know if that's true, but your uncle did mumble something about being a crab in someone's dream once. You decide not to investigate. Night comes slowly, like a guest reluctant to knock. The rain tapers to a whisper, and the paper windows no longer rattle in protest. You set out a dish of rice water for good fortune. Tuck yourself into your mat and listen as the house breathes. Wood settling, water dripping, a final sigh from the wind. In Edo, the weather isn't just something to endure, it's something to live around. You survive it not by fighting, but by layering, adjusting, and occasionally bargaining with the goat. The rain has passed, but it left everything soaked: rooftops, sandals, attitudes. You wake to the distinct squish of someone stepping into yesterday's puddle, and the faint scent of wood smoke, trying to cover up the mildew creeping into the corners of the room. Today's chore list is as long as your patience is short. You've barely blinked awake before your aunt sends you out to help repair the shutters. They rattle like hungry ghosts, she mutters, handing you a bundle of twine, a mallet, and the confidence of someone who's absolutely not coming with you. The shutters in Edo are a concept. Wooden planks fitted into grooves, sliding across the house fronts to keep out wind, rain, and nosy neighbors. They also warp in the weather squeak when the humidity rises and occasionally fall off completely in a strong breeze. Yours are the third kind. You crouch near the front of the house and prop the shutter back into place. The groove is swollen from moisture. You nudge it, tap, it nudge again. It refuses. You stare at it with the kind of quiet loathing usually reserved for tax forms and people who chew loudly. Your neighbor appears beside you holding a cup of tea and watching your struggle with the casual interest of someone who's just glad it's not their shutter today. You trying to charm it into place, he asks. No, you reply, just threatening it with consequences. He nods approvingly and sips his tea. You eventually get the shutter into place with the help of a thin sliver of wood. 3 inventive words under your breath, and the realization that it doesn't actually have to slide, it just has to stay. Functional is the aesthetic now. Edo's homes are practical marvels, flexible in design, breathable, light on their feet, but they require constant maintenance. You once spent 2 full days replacing a section of tatami mat after your cousin dropped hot ash on it. He swore it wasn't his fault. The ash, he claimed, jumped. Historians still argue whether the flexibility of Edo houses made them more resilient or just more annoying. You vote for both. They bend in the wind, they don't crumble in earthquakes, and they turn every drizzle into a leak finding expedition. Once the shutter's in place, you help your aunt lift the storage chests back into position against the wall. Everything's been slightly rearranged from yesterday's typhoon-light weather. She grumbles about roof tiles and drafty corners. You nod supportively and avoid volunteering for anything involving ladders. Your cousin is assigned roof patrol. He climbs up in a robe that's too loose and sandals that are definitely not designed for traction. You watch from below as he flattens himself like a lizard and scoots along the ridge. At one point he yells, "I see the whole neighborhood," which is exactly what you'd expect from someone perched between bravery and a sprained ankle. Back inside, you're given the job of oiling the sliding doors, a delicate process involving a rag, some sesame oil, and the patience of a monk. The doors are stubborn, warped from too many seasons of dramatic weather. You rub the rag along the track, coax the frame into alignment, and try not to sneeze from the dust. It works. Sort of. Better than before, which is all anyone asks for. You open the door for a test slide. Outside, the street is alive again. Children hop across puddles. Neighbors hang bedding from windows. A rice vendor sings about his wares in a voice so nasal it bends the air. The goat, of course, is chewing on something it shouldn't. You lean in the doorway for a moment, arms folded in your sleeves, soaking in the scent of damp earth and reheated soy. This is what peace looks like here, not quiet, but familiar, chaos reassembled into something that resembles normal. A traveling umbrella merchant walks by cart creaking. His banner says stormproof. Probably. You consider buying one, then remember you have half a miso cake and a button in your money pouch. You wave instead. Later, as the sun leans westward, you and your cousin are assigned the last task of the day, checking the alley for fallen debris. You gather broken twigs, damp cloths that blew off someone's line, and a single sandal that looks vaguely haunted. Your cousin claims it belonged to a traveling monk who floated away during the storm. You don't challenge him. One quirky local tradition says that after a storm, every house should sprinkle salt at the entrance to drive away bad spirits that ride in on the wind. Your aunt does it with dramatic flair, flinging salt like she's casting a spell. You do it more cautiously, hoping the goat doesn't lick it up. As dusk rolls in, you sit by the doorway. Again, this time with sore arms and soot on your face. The wind has finally calmed. The shutters stay quiet. The house breathes evenly again. Your uncle appears with a piece of dried fish, hands it to you, and says, "You didn't break anything today." Impressive. You chew the fish slowly. It's salty, slightly chewy, and more praise than you've received all week. In a city of paper and wood, weather is a test, and today you passed. Or at least didn't completely fail, which in Edo counts as a triumph. The sun is finally sinking, casting the whole city in a sleepy amber haze that makes even the crooked rooftops look poetic. It's the hour when shadows stretch long and neighbors shout a little less. You're wiping your hands on your robe, trying to remove fish residue, when your cousin bounds in and announces, "Kabuki night." You blink. Tonight, he nods with wild enthusiasm. They're performing The Ghost Wife of Willow Bridge. very screaming, very tragic. Your aunt sighs, but doesn't object. Even she knows that once kabuki season starts, it's like trying to stop the tide with a broom. So you throw on your cleaner robe, the one with only one ink stain, and follow the others through the winding alleys toward the theater quarter. The street lanterns have been lit, flickering behind paper shades painted with lotus blossoms and geometric swirls. The crowd thickens as you near the playhouse. Edo's theater district is always buzzing food stalls, chatter, the occasional street magician failing a coin trick beside a very unimpressed cat. The kabuki theater itself is a marvel. Wooden beams rise 3 stories high, the facade painted in bold red and black banners flapping with the names of tonight's stars. You hand over your meager coins and are ushered to the commoners section, tight quarters, rough benches, and the best place for overhearing commentary from people who've already seen the play 5 times. Kabuki isn't like other performances. It's loud, exaggerated, stylized, to the edge of parody. The actors wear heavy makeup, their faces painted in sharp colors that seem to glow beneath the oil lamps. When the villain appears, the audience hisses softly. When the hero makes his entrance, half the crowd whispers his name like it's a spell. You settle in your knees, pressed to someone's shoulder, your cousin whispering plot spoilers with the glee of a child who thinks he's helping. One mainstream Edo fact: kabuki was wildly popular with both commoners and elites, despite the government's repeated attempts to control it. The performances blended drama, music, and dance, often parodying current events or well-known legends with a flair for scandal. The play begins. A soft shamisen strum. A ghostly figure in white floats onto the stage, sleeves billowing. You're hooked. It's the story of a woman wronged, returned from the grave, seeking justice, with haunting grace and the occasional shriek. The actors move with purpose, voices trained to carry through open-air spaces. There are sword fights, sudden reveals, a dance sequence that might have been improvised. At one point, the villain monologues so long a child in the back falls asleep and starts snoring. Your cousin nudges you. That's the part where the ghost throws the fan. You whisper back, "She hasn't even died yet." Details. The ghost eventually gets her revenge, kind of, and vanishes into a cloud of stage smoke that smells suspiciously like burnt chestnut shells. The crowd erupts in claps, cheers, a few muffled sobs. Someone tosses a handful of rice in approval. It hits you in the shoulder. You consider it a blessing. One fringe belief about kabuki: some say certain roles are cursed, that if an actor performs them too many times, the character seeps into their spirit. You once heard about a man who played a fox spirit for 20 seasons and eventually ran off into the mountains, never to be seen again. Your cousin insists he turned into a real fox. You just think he got tired of lines. As the crowd spills out into the street, everyone is buzzing. A man argues that the sword choreography was too Western. A woman swears she saw the ghost actress float for real. Children recreate scenes with wooden spoons and impressive commitment. You stop by a food stall and spend your last coin on a grilled rice ball, crisp on the outside, steamy on the inside, flavored with just enough soy to make your brain sigh with gratitude. Walking home, the streets feel different, softer. The wind has calmed. The lanterns sway gently. The paper windows of shops and homes glow like fireflies, trapped in neat wooden boxes. Your cousin is still humming the kabuki theme, swinging his arms dramatically with every step. A passing monk gives him a side eye. You pretend you don't know him. Back at home, your aunt's already asleep and the hearth is still warm. You roll out your mat legs, tired but brain spinning with images from the play. Fluttering sleeves, painted stairs, revenge with grace. Historians sometimes debate whether kabuki theater was escapism or a reflection of daily Edo life. You think it was both. Where else could you watch ghosts triumph and villains cry beneath face paint that dripped like melting masks? You blow out the lamp, settle beneath your worn blanket and close your eyes. Tonight, your dreams are painted in crimson and cobalt. And maybe, just maybe, you float. You wake sometime after midnight, not with a start, but with that groggy, low-simmering confusion that only comes from segmented sleep. Your body is warm under the blanket, your face is cold above it, and your thoughts are somewhere between, was that thunder and, did I dream about pickles again? Segmented sleep is the Edo way. It's normal, expected, even healthy according to that one old man down the street who claims waking at midnight is when your soul rotates. He also claims the moon talks to him, so you take it with some soy sauce. You sit up quietly, careful not to wake the rest of the family who lie scattered around the hearth like clothes drying after a rainstorm. Someone is snoring softly. Someone else is muttering in their sleep, possibly about turnips. You shuffle over to the coals and poke them with a stick, coaxing out a little heat, a little glow. The room flickers orange. Shadows stretch. This is your secret hour. The in-between. You pour a little water from the bucket into a chipped cup and sip it slowly. Cold, metallic, somehow comforting. Outside, the world is hushed. Not silent. Just paused. You open the door a crack. The moon is high and fat, pressed into a sky the color of deep indigo cloth. A night guard walks past wooden clappers, ticking softly like a heartbeat for the city. "I know you, Jin," he calls into the darkness. "Be careful with fire." You murmur the words along with him quietly, almost instinctively. It's like a lullaby no one ever stops singing. Historians still argue whether this midnight wakefulness was culturally enforced or simply a product of early bedtimes and inconsistent heat. Either way, it's yours now. And it's oddly peaceful. You light a small lamp, not for brightness, but for companionship. You take out your brush and a sliver of parchment. Sometimes you write poetry, sometimes you doodle. Tonight it's a list. Things you did today. Things you forgot. Things you might dream about if the moon allows. You jot goat incident. 1 rice ball. Kabuki ghost wife. Still owe aunt new needle. You pause, then add, midnight is mine. In the corner, your cousin stirs and mumbles something about carrots. You smile. One fringe belief says, if you speak aloud during this waking hour, your words float longer, like incense in the cold. Might be overheard by spirits. So you whisper nothing important, just tiny nothings. Maybe they'll reach someone who needs them. Maybe they'll just hover and disappear. Either way, it feels right. You tuck the parchment under your mat and lie back down, arms behind your head, staring at the ceiling beams above. They creak softly in the night wind, a lullaby of dry wood and time. You count them like you did as a child. 1, 2, 3 with a crack, 4 with a knot that looks like a frowning face. The second half of the night is always deeper, heavier. Your body starts to remember the weight of sleep pulling you back under like a tide returning to sea. You curl on your side, blanket up to your ears, nose just poking out into the chilled air. The coals hum behind you, faint but present. The house is still. Outside, the watchman's clappers fade into the distance. The dog barks once sharply, then nothing. Just Edo breathing. You drift again. And this time there are no pickles, just the moon, floating, watching, whispering its round secrets into your dreams. The next time you wake, the room is filled with pale morning light, the color of old paper soaked in tea. Your joints protest as you sit up a little slower than yesterday, a little stiffer than you'd like to admit. You stretch, yawn quietly, and shuffle to the door, careful not to step on your cousin's outstretched arm. He's sprawled out like he fought a dragon in his sleep and lost. You slide open the door, and the air greets you with that crisp clarity only found after a long night of rain and stories. It smells of damp earth, cooked soy, and the faint trace of wood smoke. The city feels refreshed, like someone gently wrung it out and laid it flat to dry. Your first task, breakfast duty, you make your way to the kitchen corner and survey your tools. A fire pit, a kettle, and ingredients that are best described as humble. Some leftover rice, a chunk of miso, and a few wild greens your aunt gathered the day before. You stoke the coals back to life, adding twigs, then larger bits of wood, coaxing the orange glow with the patience of someone who really doesn't want cold soup again. Cooking in an Edo home is less art, more survival ballet. The miso paste slides into the water with a familiar plop. You stir it slowly, adding the greens and just a dash of fermented pickle brine for depth. You know it's not fancy, but it's warm, and warm counts for a lot. One mainstream Edo truth breakfast was often small but sacred. A simple bowl of rice, miso soup, and pickles could set the tone for your entire day. You've never understood how something so quiet could feel so important, but here you are humming softly as the steam curls upward, feeling oddly content. Your cousin shuffles over, yawning like a bear who just discovered beds. He flops down beside you and mutters, "Did the ghost wife really disappear? Or was that symbolic?" You ladle soup into 2 bowls and pass one to him. Both, you say, because it sounds wise and you don't want to explain symbolism before breakfast. As you eat, the neighborhood stirs. Outside, a carpenter begins hammering somewhere down the lane. A mother calls to her child to find your other sandal. or stay home forever. A rooster crows, late, confused, but enthusiastic. Your aunt enters the room and immediately begins inspecting everything. The soup, the fire, your posture. She grunts once in approval and sits down with her own bowl. Compliments in this house are measured in grunts. You've earned one today. Once the bowls are washed and the ashes stirred, you're sent to assist with shop deliveries. Not yours, of course, your family doesn't own a shop, but your aunt's friend's niece twisted her ankle chasing a runaway cabbage, so now you're the emergency backup. You tie your robe tighter, tuck your sleeves in, and head to the fabric vendor's shop on the edge of the merchant quarter. The front is already open, bolts of indigo cotton hanging like sleepy flags. You're handed a bundle wrapped in plain cloth, told the destination's second stall. Past the incense cellar right of the barrel maker before the corner with the loud dog, and sent on your way. Navigation in Edo is less about addresses and more about memory relationships and knowing which dog bites. You dodge carts, tiptoe around puddles, and pause to bow to an older man who nods like he's just remembered you from another life. You reach the stall, deliver the bundle, and receive a paper-wrapped sweet as thanks. It's bean paste again. Of course it is. You nibble the sweet slowly, letting the sugar sink in, leaning against a post near the incense stall. A customer is arguing about whether sandalwood or pine attracts better spirits. The vendor insists sandalwood is traditional. The customer insists pine smells friendlier. You think both smell like not soup, which is a win. You take the long route home through the canal side path. The water glitters in the sun, the boats bobbing gently like they've nowhere to be. A woman is washing vegetables at the edge, her hands red from the cold. A cat watches her like it's waiting to inherit the stall. One fringe tale says the canals are haunted by the souls of fish who grew too clever. That if you whisper your troubles into the water, they'll be carried away. Unless the fish hear something interesting, in which case they'll come visit in your dreams. You've whispered into the canal before. Nothing's shown up yet, except a frog. You return home to find the house bustling with laundry. Your cousin is beating futons with a stick. Your aunt is yelling at a stain. Your job, hang the bedding just right, angled to catch the sun, but not the goat's interest. She's already eyeing the blankets like they owe her money. You hang the laundry in neat rows, clapping dust from the corners and shaking out the lingering damp. There's something soothing about the rhythm. Lift, shake, pin, step, stretch, squint. Even if your fingers sting and your sandals are slowly sliding apart. Once done, you sit under the eaves, sipping barley tea from a chipped cup, watching the steam rise and curl like lazy ghosts escaping the cup's rim. Another day in Edo. No fires, no floods, no major goat disasters. You exhale and think, I could do this again tomorrow. Your aunt has decided today is the day for a deep clean. Not a gentle sweep, not a polite dusting. A full-on rearrange the furniture, shake the rice bin, beat the floor mats kind of day. You know better than to protest. Resistance only leads to extra scrubbing and lectures about dust demons. She hands you a rag, a bucket of lukewarm water, and a pointed stare. You respond with a slow, dramatic bow, equal parts respect and resignation, and begin the first task, wiping down the wooden beams. You stand on a stool, that wobbles like it owes someone money and stretch upward rag in hand. The beam is coated in a delicate layer of soot, cobweb, and history. You scrub carefully, imagining you're wiping away the whispers of generations past. Or more accurately, last winter's stove smoke and your cousin's bad habit of throwing noodles. Cleaning in Edo isn't glamorous, but it's an event. Everyone gets involved, sometimes willingly. Your cousin is sweeping under the mats, muttering curses at imaginary bugs. Your uncle has taken charge of inventorying the household goods, which mostly involves holding up broken items and saying this might still be useful. One mainstream Edo truth houses were kept meticulously clean. Dirt wasn't just unpleasant, it was suspicious. A clean house reflected well on your family and ward. A dirty one could draw gossip fines or a visit from the neighborhood headman. You moved to the window slats next, using a strip of cloth wrapped around a bamboo stick to get between the slats. Outside, neighbors are doing the same. You spot 3 heads bobbing along rooftops. 2 children shaking out mats like they're trying to exorcise them, and 1 woman furiously scrubbing a bucket that may or may not be cursed. Your aunt directs like a general, pointing at stains like battlefield targets. There. And there. And don't forget, under the storage chest, we lost a whole daikon to that corner last month. You lift the chest and find it. It's not recognizable as daikon anymore. One fringe superstition says that cleaning house during certain phases of the moon can drive away bad luck. Your aunt doesn't care about the moon. She believes dust itself is bad luck. The more you scrub, the more luck you're restoring. You secretly wonder if she invented this theory just to keep you busy. Midday arrives with sore arms, and the satisfaction of knowing your floor can now be eaten off of. Not that you'd recommend it. Your reward: lunch barley rice, a half-sour pickle, and a square of tamagoyaki that your aunt claims is perfectly seasoned. You nod because disagreeing would result in more scrubbing. After lunch, the cleaning continues, this time with paper doors. You hold one, carefully supporting the frame while your cousin patches a tear with a new sheet of washi paper. It's trickier than it looks. The paste must be just right. The paper must line up perfectly. You mess up the first one and are immediately given the look. Historians still argue whether Edo's obsession with cleanliness was practical or performative. You're leaning toward both. Clean homes were cooler in summer, warmer in winter, and less likely to harbor pests. But also, your aunt once polished a ladle just because a guest complimented it 2 years ago. By late afternoon, the air smells of rice paste, sun-dried tatami, and success. You sit on the porch with a damp cloth over your head, exhausted but victorious. Your cousin collapses beside you with dramatic flair. "We've defeated the dust," he declares. "For now," you reply, "because it always comes back." Your aunt appears with a tray of tea and a suspiciously kind expression. "Good work," she says. You and your cousin exchange a look. Is this a trap? A setup? A precursor to another task? No, it's just tea. And peace. For now. You sip slowly. The bitterness is grounding. The cup is warm in your hands. The breeze is gentle. You watch laundry ripple on the line. Neighbors laugh across rooftops. A cat walk the beam of a fence like it owns the world. Then a voice rings out from a few houses down, "The inspector's coming tomorrow." You both groan in unison. Your aunt just smiles and says, "Good thing we started early." Evening descends with the rhythm of wiping cloths and folding rags. The house is spotless. The mats are straight. The dust demons, if they ever existed, have been banished for now. You roll out your sleeping mat and lie down sore, but satisfied. The moon peeks through the window like a quiet nod of approval. Your cousin mumbles something about how ghosts must love clean houses. You don't disagree. You fall asleep thinking maybe, just maybe, the daikon ghost will forgive you. Morning arrives too quickly, and with it the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for weddings, audits, or surprise visits from distant relatives. The inspector is due today, and your house is already humming with forced serenity. You're polishing a ladle like it's the emperor's mirror. Your cousin is brushing the goat. The goat looks skeptical. Your aunt is pacing, adjusting absolutely nothing, but making it look like she's fixing everything. "Straighten that mat," she whispers. "It looks crooked." It doesn't. You straighten it anyway. In Edo neighborhood, inspectors appointed by the local headman or ward committee weren't just looking for fire hazards or public disturbances. They were looking for harmony, cleanliness, order, signs that you, your home, and your family were behaving as expected by the Tokugawa regime. A tidy house was a loyal house. A loyal house was a quiet one. You adjust the rice scoop for the third time and try to remember what you're supposed to say if asked about your firewood storage. Properly stacked, shaded, and away from the cooking hearth. You whisper it like a mantra. There's a sudden knock. 3 sharp taps, and the air in the room stiffens. The door slides open, and there he is. Dressed in somber grays, a subtle pattern stitched into the sleeves, face calm but unreadable. He's flanked by 2 assistants, one holding a scroll, and Brush, the other, holding nothing but silent judgment. You bow. Deep. Respectful, but not groveling. You've practiced. The inspector surveys the room. His eyes flick from your robe to the window shutters to the fire bucket in the corner. You feel seen in a way that isn't flattering. He speaks little, just nods once and gestures. The assistant steps forward and begins noting things. Your tatami layout, the condition of your storage baskets, the height of your stacked futons. You didn't know futon height mattered until last spring, when your neighbor was warned for excessive bedding. You've slept like a minimalist ever since. One mainstream Edo fact: these inspections helped maintain the rigid social structure of the time. They weren't just about houses, they were about maintaining order. Everyone had a place, everyone was expected to stay in it. Comfortably, quietly. Your aunt presents a small dish of preserved plum slices and barley tea. A peace offering, a distraction, a tradition. The inspector sips, says nothing, then miraculously nods. The assistants roll up the scroll. The inspector inclines his head, stands, and steps out the door like a breeze leaving the room. You don't breathe until his sandals disappear from view. Then your cousin exhales loudly. The goat bleats, and your aunt sits down like she's just finished climbing a mountain made of expectations. You did it. You passed. No warnings, no questions. No extra duties assigned for clarity. You feel lighter, though that might just be the adrenaline crash. To celebrate, your aunt breaks out a carefully hoarded sweet rice cake. It's soft, mildly sweet, and tastes like victory. Your cousin immediately declares himself inspection hero. Your aunt reminds him that brushing the goat was not central to your success. You agree, silently. Later, as the day winds on and the tension dissolves, life returns to normal. You run an errand to the grain shop, help your uncle rewrap a thatch bundle, and listen as the neighbors whisper about how one house was dinged for mismatched roof tile angles. Everyone agrees it was Aunt Suki's, but no one says it out loud. By mid-afternoon, you find yourself at the riverbank watching laundry flap in the breeze, and a pair of boys trying to build a raft out of firewood and hope. They invite you to join. You politely decline and offer to time how long it floats. It lasts 11 seconds. A new record. One fringe theory among your neighbors is that inspectors are trained to read the emotional state of a house, that they can sense conflict just by how tightly the dishes are stacked. You don't believe it, but you do notice that people seem calmer the day after an inspection, like they've all exhaled at once and decided to be slightly better humans for at least 2 days. You return home to find your aunt rearranging the shelves again. You offer to help. She waves you off and mutters, "Next month's inspector will expect different symmetry." You don't know if that's true. You don't ask. You just set the kettle on the stove and start preparing tea. That evening, as the sun sinks and the streets quiet, your family gathers around the hearth. It's still warm from the day's use, and the shadows play gently across the paper walls. Your cousin asks if the inspector liked the goat. Your aunt tells him to hush. Your uncle hums a song older than the roof beams. You sit back sipping tea, feeling the relief settle deep into your bones. You survived the inspection. The house is still standing. The goat is no longer offended. You exhale. Outside, the lanterns glow. Inside, so do you. You wake the next morning to a rare moment of stillness. No shouting, no sweeping, no aunt hovering with a list. Just early light sliding across the floor like a quiet visitor, and the scent of rice slowly steaming in the pot. It's not a special day, not a festival or market morning, just a quiet, regular day in Edo, which honestly feels like a holiday. You stretch, yawn, and decide radically not to rush. You sit beside the hearth, pull your sleeves over your hands, and warm your fingers on the clay rim. The fire crackles faintly. A single pot bubbles, promising breakfast and comfort. Your cousin stirs in his sleep, mumbling something about tofu and revenge. The goat bleats softly from outside. You wonder if she dreams. You hope not. Her waking life already seems too chaotic. You finish your bowl of rice slowly, savoring each bite like it's rare. In a way it is. Peace, like soft pickles, doesn't last long in Edo. Something always breaks, or leaks, or smells suspicious. You spend the morning delivering a borrowed pan to the neighbor 3 houses down, the one who always smells faintly of plum vinegar and old shoes. He thanks you with a dried persimmon and a warning about raccoons nesting in the alley latrine. You make a note to avoid it for a while. You pass by the incense stall and buy a single stick, the cheapest one, but still blessed by someone's grandfather, according to the vendor. You light it at a small roadside shrine, offer a bow, and whisper something that isn't quite a prayer and isn't quite a wish. Just a thought let go. One mainstream Edo fact: roadside shrines were everywhere, tucked between houses built onto bridges, hidden in alleys. Each one held a different spirit. Some offered luck, some demanded snacks. All expected a moment of your time. Your afternoon is spent helping your aunt dry herbs in the sunlight. You sit on the porch, sorting sprigs of mint and shiso, arranging them in neat lines across woven mats. It smells sharp, fresh, and strangely clean. Your cousin tries to eat one, regrets it instantly. You both laugh until your aunt threatens to throw the whole batch into the goat pen. One fringe belief says that herbs dried with laughter work better. You're not sure if it's true, but it feels right. The sun climbs, then tilts. Shadows stretch. The breeze slips in through the open doorway and ruffles the edge of a scroll hanging on the wall. You glance at it, the one with calligraphy your uncle claims is from a famous monk. You're not so sure. The characters are definitely upside down. You help prepare the evening meal: miso soup, pickled daikon, roasted root vegetables, and just enough barley rice to fill the bowls without filling your stomach too much. The taste isn't new, but it's warm, familiar, yours. Later you sit outside and watch the lanterns being lit across the street. Paper screens glow from within, someone singing a lullaby 2 houses over. A dog barks once, then stops. Even the wind feels gentle. You think about everything that's happened this week: the inspections, the rain, the rooftop goat, the kabuki ghost, the midnight moon. All of it strange and beautiful in the way that only ordinary life can be. Your cousin flops down beside you and says, "If you could be anything, what would you be?" You think for a long moment. "A tatami mat," you finally say. Worn flat, but always part of the story. He snorts. "I'd be a noodle cart, loud, useful, and full of soup." You sit in silence watching the stars blink into view, the Milky Way stretching like a brushstroke across the sky. You wonder how many people in Edo are sitting on porches just like this, having the same conversations, breathing the same breeze. One last lantern flickers on across the lane. A cat walks the beam of a fence with the calm of someone who owns the whole district. Your aunt calls softly from inside. Time to come in. The day is ending. You rise slowly, brush the dust from your robe, and follow the light back home. Tomorrow there will be more rice, more chores, more arguments about futon placement. But for now, you're here. Alive. Tired. Content. Exactly where you belong. And now the fire has faded to a soft, glowing hush. The streets of Edo sleep under their lattice of tiled roofs. and paper windows breathing slow and deep. The lanterns have been extinguished one by one, and the last footsteps have faded into the wooden alleys. You lie back, tucked under your woven blanket, the weight just enough to quiet your thoughts. Your mat creaks softly beneath you, the walls no longer whispering, just the gentle hush of night like a lullaby carried on wind from the Sumida River. Your hands are still warm from the last bowl of tea. Your toes finally are not cold. Somewhere in the house, someone turns in their sleep. The embers crackle once more like a voice saying, "You've done enough. No more errands tonight. No goats to wrangle. No scrolls to carry. No ghosts to chase. Only breath. Only stillness. Only the low, steady rhythm of a city resting. Let the dreams come slowly like the tide in the canal, soft and silver and smooth. Let them drift across your mind like wisps of incense, like steam from a soup pot, like whispers through tatami cracks. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time. But for now, this moment is yours. Sleep deeply, traveler. You've survived Edo. End of script. Sweet dreams.